So what I'm going to do is unmute a couple people and just make sure that you're hearing. So let's see, how about Patty Huff? Oops. Just a sec here. There we go. So Patty, I see that you've called in on a phone. So okay, great. Patty, where are you located?
Michigan.
In Michigan. I grew up in Michigan. What part?
Jackson.
Okay, I grew up just outside Detroit. So good. It's nice to meet another Michigander. So, and Patty, you can hear me. Yeah, and you can see the screen that says Redesigning School Counseling. It's a PowerPoint slide. Okay, perfect. So we're assuming that everybody can see that. On your control panel, we have a very large group participating today. On your control panel, you'll see that there's a place where you can type in questions. If you can type those in, that would be great, and we'll just stop periodically and take questions that come in. We just did this webinar, just finished it up for counselors in Indiana. Had another very, very large group, and it really had great questions. So please do, as things pop in your head, jot a question down and we'll make sure that we answer it. Our goal is that in the next hour or so that we've answered all of your questions, presented everything to you, and you are able to go ahead and start using the time use log immediately. Okay, so I think that's it. Amy Drake from our initiative is, from our organization, is also going to participate in this call. She's our director of programming, and she is the person who kind of takes all of our ideas and gets them into an online system. She works directly with our programmer. So, okay. Hi, Amy. Good, you're here. Wonderful. So, okay. So, just a couple of things to get started. Our organization is the American Student Achievement Institute. We're a nonprofit that was founded by school counselors. Actually in 1996, we incorporated as a nonprofit in 2000. We do a lot of work nationally. One of our initiatives, Redesigning School Counseling, is a national initiative. We have schools in 41 states using that, and it's totally free. You might have heard that Indiana has a lot of Ask-A-Ramp schools. We have 129 Ask-A-Ramp schools. However, we also have 285 total that qualified for it, but some of their schools did not want to pay the fee to apply for that Ask-A-Ramp award. So I like to say that we have 285 ramp eligible schools in Indiana, but 129 actually applied for the award. So all of those schools used our free Redesigning School Counseling initiative to design a data-driven, accountable school counseling program. And I'll show you how to get one of those free accounts in a second. But this is the time task log is one of the tools that we use in Redesigning School Counseling. So you can use the time task log all by itself. We also have a very comprehensive college and career readiness survey for students. You can use that as a free tool by itself, or you can go through our whole process. So schools do both. Okay, so our nonprofit, founded by school counselors, our mission is to raise achievement and close achievement gaps. We hold ourselves accountable for the percentage of students in the schools that we serve who pass state tests. So everything's about raising student achievement. I like to when I'm talking with counselors, I'd like to explain that if we were career counselors, we'd be applying our services to help folks be successful in their careers. And as school counselors, we're applying our services to help kids be successful at school. So we really think that the bottom line is, did student achievement go up? Do more students make the types of choices that successful students make? So, okay, our expertise is in data-driven systemic change. We love creating statewide movements. We loved creating Redesigning School Counseling in Indiana. We now have 15% of the schools in the state who voluntarily went through this data-driven systemic change process with us. So we're eager to do this with other states. So if, I don't know if anybody's listening who's associated with your school counseling association or your state department, we'd love to talk with you about replicating what we did in Indiana in another state. So our expertise is in statewide grassroots movements. And the way we learned this is that there was an endowment that did a project in the 1990s where they partnered school council, just 5 school counselors, big time for multiple years, with experts from the business community in systemic change. And I was fortunate enough to be one of those counselors. It was an amazing opportunity. And they taught us how to use data to drive change. They taught us how to face resistance, how to handle resistance. I mean, we learned so much, and then we applied that to designing a data-driven school counseling program. So, and then just a little bit about me. This whole redesigning school counseling is based on the school counseling program that I developed when I was in the schools. I was in the public schools for 20 years, both as a middle school counselor and a high school counselor. But we've also done our initiatives with lots of elementary schools. I was fortunate and honored to be selected as the Indiana High School Counselor of the Year. And then I also received the ASCA National Secondary School Counselor of the Year awards. So those awards, that's always nice, but what they really did is open the door for me to talk with non-counselors about school counseling, and they thought that since I had these awards, I must know what I'm talking about. So, but it was really nice to get those. I've been heavily involved in professional associations, both in Indiana. I served on the ASCA board. I made the motion for ASCA to create the ASCA National Standards originally, so kind of, got that started. And then I also chaired ASCA's Comprehensive Developmental School Counseling Task Force, and I chaired ASCA's National Leadership Development Institute, where the president and president-elects from all the states came to learn. So I've served with our state department as our school counseling consultant in Indiana for 10 years, and then I left that position to found the nonprofit that I'm working with now. So yeah, so that's kind of me and our organization. And I guess the main thing that I'd like you to be aware of is that we view ourselves as school counselors. We're just practicing in a different way. We're providing professional development for counselors rather than still working directly with kids, which is what you do. So we think it's just a great partnership. So, okay. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at some definitions so that we're all using the same language. We'll look at how to complete the time use log. We'll talk about some rationale about why to do a time use log. I think in my own school, doing a time use log is the best thing I ever did. It opened up so many doors for me. It totally changed my program, but I'll talk a little bit about that too. And then we'll do a walkthrough of the time use log and then answer any questions that you have. Before we get started, I need to show you how to create an RSC account. So go here. So to create an RSC account, you might want to jot this down. You're going to go to our website, www.asainstitute.org. So I'm going to repeat that, www.asa for American Student Achievement, asainstitute.org, and then /RSC for redesigning school counseling. Okay, asainstitute.org/RSC. Okay, when you get to that page, you're going to see some announcements. You're going to see some resources where you can learn more about RSC if you want to, a flyer, our approach, and then there's some videos that are kind of introductions to RSC. So you can look at that or not look at it, your choice. You can log in once you've created an account. This is where you log in as a school to get to your account. But what we need you to do to begin with is to create a free account. This program is also available to graduate students, but you just click here for create a free account. And oh, it's telling me that I'm already logged in, so and then I'd have to log out. At any rate, the next thing that you would get is a series of questions about you, or I'm sorry, your contact information, and then information about your school, like what grades do you have, what the name of your school is, things like that. And then it will create an account for your school, and you'll also, in that process, create a username and have a username and a password. So that username and password you'll need to have in order to set up your school's school counseling log system, time use log system. So the reason you're creating this account is just to get that username and password, because that's the username and password that gets you into all of our resources, including the time use log. It doesn't, require that you use anything else in the RSC system, and it's all totally free. You don't pay for any of this. So, okay. So now, let's go back. So now you've got your username and password. The other thing we need to talk about is our terminology. So we use different terms than what ASCA uses and what Norm Geisbers has talked about forever. The reason is we've been doing this for like 20 years, and we engage the community and teachers and principals a lot in our work. Our schools do. What we found is that words like responsive services and systems, system support, those words didn't ring a bell with non-counselors. So we started looking for what words would make sense to principals and parents and school board members and community organizations. And what we discovered was they're familiar with the words guidance and counseling. So we decided to just go ahead and use those words, although in our minds, we're thinking ASCA terms. So in our terms that we use in our system, we're going to use the types of activities that counselors provide are counseling, guidance, advocacy, and management, those 4 types. And I'll define each of those. So guidance, which in ASCA or Norm Geisber's terms would be classroom guidance and individual planning. So individual planning, we believe, is guidance. We're just doing it one-on-one. Where classroom guidance is guidance where we're doing it in classrooms. We're defining guidance as the help that all students receive from a whole lot of different people, parents, teachers, counselors, community members, and that help enables them to make sound choices in areas that impact academic success. We believe that there's a strong connection between school counseling and academic success, and we believe that that connection is that students that are involved in sound school counseling programs make better choices in areas that impact achievement. So in guidance, we're helping kids make those choices. If you were to ever decide to get into RSC, that's our whole program design process starts with identifying the choices that you want kids to make. Okay, now there's a couple things that are key about this definition. The first one is the word all. We believe that every single student in your school deserves to have sound guidance. And often that's not the case for a number of reasons. That's why we have this time use log, because we think that this time use data can be used to advocate for more sound programs. But it's for every student. Just like every student gets math, every student gets language arts, we believe that every student should get guidance. Also, when we're in guidance mode, we're in teaching mode. We're teaching students what a FAFSA is. We're teaching students where to find extra help. We're teaching students how to be assertive rather than aggressive, or what to do if they witness bullying. We're teaching. And because we're in teaching mode when those activities are done, we believe that it does not require a master's degree in school counseling to deliver those services. We think that parents, teachers, counselors, community members who have been trained in the content that they're teaching and who have been trained in the limits of confidentiality and how to make a referral when they need to break confidentiality, we think that lots of those different folks can deliver guidance services to kids. But the key thing to remember, even if you're just using counselors for those services, is that it's for every student in the building, regardless of, who, if this is a low-income student, a high, a more affluent student, if it's a student who's shy, a student who's not shy, it's for every student in the building. Okay, so that's guidance. We're in teaching mode. In counseling, in Geisper's terms, or ASCA terms, we refer to that as responsive services. And that's the help that some students receive from credentialed professionals now, not just anybody, but a credentialed professional to address a personal or social issue that's interfering with learning. If your school is typical, about 20% of your students are coming to school every day with some personal social issue that's interfering with their learning. And again, if our goal is for kids to be learners, the schools need to address these social personal issues. So counseling is not for every student, and it's also not performed by just any adult. It needs to be a licensed professional in the helping field, like a licensed school counselor, a licensed school psych, or a licensed school social worker. So that's how we're using the terms guidance and counseling. Then we believe that another legitimate use of counselor time is in advocacy for students. Sometimes that advocacy is for an individual student, like if you are attending a special ed annual case review and you're there as the student's advocate, and you're not there as the administrator of that conference, but you're there as the student advocate, then that would be an advocacy activity, and we believe is a legitimate use of your time. Or maybe you've noticed that there's a group of students that are not getting a fair shake in your school. For example, maybe you're in a high school, there's a course that has a prerequisite that students have, that students purchase equipment, and you know that your free and reduced lunch kids are not going to be able to make that purchase. So you might be an advocate for your free and reduced lunch kids to help your teachers or your administrators understand that that prerequisite is making the playing field unlevel for your low-income kids, your free and reduced lunch kids. So that's advocacy. And then management is the behind-the-scenes tasks that you're doing to make your school counseling program run. So in the morning, when you spend the first 20 minutes writing passes to get kids into your office, that's a management activity. If you're collecting data to evaluate your program, that's a management activity. If you're doing professional development, like right now, you're participating in a management activity. So they're the activities that are going to make your school counseling program run smoothly and efficiently. Okay, now, we all know that there are activities that counselors are asked to do that are not guidance and counseling or advocacy and management. We call those activities non-program activities. And in a time use log, we want to log those activities as well. So, so we define non-program activities as any activities that are not guidance, counseling, advocacy, or your program management. In other words, there are activities that have nothing to do with school counseling. So here are some examples: generating report cards, calculating honor rolls, scheduling teachers or writing your master schedule, balancing class loads, state testing, substitute teaching, awards night, graduation, attendance. I mean, the list goes on and on. So we like to say, and I believe this is true, that those are good activities. I mean, somebody's got to do those things. So the question, though, is just where do those activities get assigned? And one of the things I love about the time use log is it identifies the percentage of time that counselors are spending those non-program activities. So, again, let's, look at those activities. Let's acknowledge that we're doing them, and then let's put some numbers to the percentage of time that we spend doing those activities. One other thing about non-program activities, because school counselors have performed some of those activities for so long, so many years, it's just now assumed that that is a legitimate use of our time. Personal example, in my school, we did master scheduling. I wrote the master schedule. And I had done that, the counselors had done that for so long, it was just assume that it was a legitimate use of our time. I can remember presenting to our school board about our time use studies, and the school board wanted to know, what are you spending your non-program time doing? What are all those things? And we were ready and had a list. And I remember they were so confused. They said, wait a minute, you mean in your graduate degree in school counseling, you didn't take a course in master scheduling? And we said, no. When I'm sitting down doing a master schedule, I am not helping students master a guidance indicator. I'm not helping students with a social personal issue that's interfering with their learning. I'm not advocating for a group of kids. I'm not managing my own program. So that is a non-program activity. Yeah, so we kind of went through and looked at things. And a lot of this depends on how you look at different activities. Like we also had to do lunchroom duty, which we thought was such a waste of time. And then we figured, so it would be non-program, didn't have anything to do with our program. But then we figured out that lunchroom duty could be like walk-in hours. And so, we publicized to the students, the counselors are going to be in the lunchroom. If you have a quick question, just come up and talk to us. And kids that had quick questions started using that as our walk-in hours. And then it was no longer a non-program activity, but now it was a guidance activity. So lunchroom duty for us was a guidance activity. So, okay. So now, so those are the definitions. So let's talk about like how this works with completing a time use log. I'm going to show you a copy of a paper time use log. This is the one that we used to use. And this is actually one of my time use logs when I was in the schools. I changed all the kids' names, for confidentiality purposes. But you can see on Monday morning of this week, I came in and I was developing a form. It was a form that I was going to need in my school counseling program, so that was a management activity. And then once the kids came in the building, I started doing individual guidance appointments. You can see they were 20-minute appointments. Given that this was a September, I think, month or week, I was probably working with kids here on their schedule changes, which we viewed as being guidance because we were, as we talked about the schedule changes, we were also talking about the kids' career plans and their academic plans and making sure that the courses that they were enrolled in were going to connect with their career and academic plans. So for us, that was guidance. Then you can see on Tuesday, I kind of did the same thing. I attended a faculty meeting, which I viewed as outreach for our department. So that was management. It helped our department. But then you can see here in the middle of all these guidance appointments, Julie Sang came in, and all of a sudden I've got a counseling in the middle of all that. So what happened was Julie was originally scheduled to come in for a guidance appointment. In the middle of the guidance appointment, she talked to me about a social personal issue that was going on, and we spent the majority of that time doing a counseling issue. I already had passes out to see the rest of the students, so we resolved very quickly what Julie was talking to me about. But then you can see we came back the very next day, first thing, with a longer appointment to take care of Julie's needs. If I couldn't have waited for the next day, then these students would have been sent back to class. Just like if you're in a doctor's office and you're there, and everybody's there because they have a cold, and then somebody comes in with something that's life-threatening, the doctor is, going to say to everybody, please wait on your cold. I need to take care of this urgent situation. So I saw, but Julie was able to wait till the next day, so we got her in, and then you can see that we met with Julie on, we met with Julie for a follow-up on Thursday and then another follow-up on Friday. So a couple other things I wanted to point out. My advisory group, this was a group classroom guidance activity, so that came in as G, and then it got carried for the whole hour. And then I met with some parents. Remember, one aspect of counseling is consultation. So I was consulting with the parents about how to work with their child, and that got logged in as a counseling activity because it was consultation with a third party. And then you can see I was printing report cards at the end of the day, and that got logged in as a non-program. So yeah, that's kind of how this works, except we're going to do it online. When this was on paper, counselors had to add up like 3,000 of these little tiny time blocks to calculate their time percentages, and now the online system is going to do all that for them. So also want to talk about Rationale before we get into the online system, because we know this is going to take time, and why do it if it's not worthwhile? So to me, as I mentioned, this was like the best thing I ever did. So on Rationale, we use this to gain control of our day. Our school counseling program went from 90% of doing things that had nothing to do with school counseling to only 10% of our time having to dealing with things that didn't address school counseling. So how do we do that? The best thing that we did was we started logging it, and we logged ahead of time. So just like, a doctor is not going to say, yeah, just wander in when you need us, and, we'll just see people as they get here. I mean, there are some, walk-in clinics, but most of your doctors, they schedule your time. Lawyers, same thing. They're going to, have a schedule. So we recommend that you fill out that schedule, your daily log, ahead of time. I liked to fill mine out a week at a time, but at the very minimum, a day at a time. So I always made sure when I left school that all of my passes for the next day were written and in the teacher's mailboxes, ready to be passed out in first period. So that way, if somebody wandered into my office and said, oh, Sue, do you have a minute? Like teachers would, or my principal would, I would say, I'd really love to talk to you, but I already have passes out for the whole day and I'm going to get so backed up. Could we talk tomorrow? And then I'd schedule them in. That way I was able to use every single one of my minutes efficiently. So one of our big recommendations is that you complete your time use log ahead of time, knowing that it may change if some student comes in with an emergency. And because we think more than anything that will help you gain control over your day. At least it did me. This was the biggest benefit to our program. And I have to, if I'm being totally honest, I went down kicking and screaming. I did not want to do this. I said, I don't have time to do this. It's a waste of my time. I don't need this data. It's the best thing I ever did. So I was forced to do a time task log by my principal. And man, she was right. It was just the best. Okay, so now, your time use data, your aggregated data, can be very much used to advocate for your program. So here's how we suggest you do that. First thing you need to do is to establish what your students' needs are. So you could give our college and career readiness survey, which is really a student needs assessment for guidance and counseling. So then what I ended up doing is sitting down with my principal, and I said, look at all of our student needs. And when you look at student needs, I don't care who you are, it breaks your heart, that students are stressed, or students don't know where to find financial aid information, or students don't know that there's extra help available in your school. I mean, there's a lot of student needs. And if you're a parent or the principal or whoever, I mean, once you see that data that kids have all these needs, it's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do that? So then we established and created this sense of urgency through the student needs data. Then we said, and by the way, here's how our counselors spend their time. And so I was able to say to our school board and our advisory council, we spend 90% of our time doing things that have absolutely nothing to do with guidance and counseling. And that's okay if that's how you want us to spend that time. But if not, if you'd like us to tackle some of these student, problems, issues, if we can figure out how to get rid of these non-program tasks from our assignment, that would give us more time to tackle more of the student needs. So that, I hope you can see, that sounds real different than just going into the principal and whining, if you will, about how much time we don't have. Because it puts that discussion in the terms of student needs rather than counselor needs. Often I hear counselors talk about all the time that they don't have, and they're always talking about themselves. I don't have this time. I have too many non-program tasks. But when we talk about it in terms of student needs and our ability to meet student needs, it's no longer whining. It won't come across as whining. It never was whining. It won't come across as whining because we're housing that discussion in terms of student needs. So went to my counselor, I went to my principal, said, here's all my student needs, and then I also said, here's a list of programs that if I had time, I would like to do. Teacher advisor program, a group counseling for truant kids. I mean, I just listed all the group counseling for aggressive kids was another one. Listed all these things, and then I said, if we could get our heads together and figure out how to get rid of these non-program tasks, we could reduce our non-program time use and free up time to deliver some of these other programs. And then I also said to my principal, and you can pick, whatever you'd like me to do. If you'd like me to set up a teacher advisor program, if you'd like me to do a group counseling for truant kids or aggressive kids who have had a discipline referral, or whatever it is that you'd like. Presented that way with that time use data, my principal was totally on board, as was my advisory council. My advisory council really got on board and became an advocate, a strong advocate for changing the way that school counselors were used in our school. So, but again, it's data that tells the stories. It's really powerful. In terms of job security, we've worked with a lot of schools whose counselors were looking at a reduction in force. They were looking at being riffed. And those counselors with the data were able to say, you're not riffing John Doe, you're riffing part of a program. John spent 50% of his time delivering counseling activities, and you were going to lose those activities if John is riffed. We've had school board meetings where the board have turned around their decision to get rid of a counselor after looking at the data and seeing student needs and seeing how that counselor could spend his or her time. So really powerful that data is. Okay, I've kind of talked about my story. I mentioned that at my school, our counselors were spending 90% of their time doing things that had nothing to do with school counseling. Year after year, we worked on removing a few of those non-programming tasks each year. And then 7 years later, we were down to 10% of our time with non-program tasks. In our previous webinar, the question was asked, well, who did all those tasks that you used to do? And again, once everybody started looking at the data, student needs data and counselor time use data, those two together, then they started getting really creative. So let me give you some examples. Our athletic director said that he volunteered to take over state testing for us. So in addition to being the athletic director, he was the state test coordinator. And he just stepped up and said, if I do that, then that would give you time to do this group counseling or to set up a teacher advisor program or whatever he was interested in. So that happened. One of my teachers, a math teacher who on our council, that math teacher said, I have 6 assignments of math, 6 classes of math to teach, but 3 of them are really, really small. There's not very many students in them. And she said, if you were to combine those 3 classes into 2, that would free me up for a period where I could do some of those non-program tasks. So, and again, what sold her was the student needs data and knowing that if she freed up my time, I could do more counseling. So, and then our principal, bless her heart, she said, I'll take on the master schedule. So that moved over to her. But then there are lots of these. Our community organizations volunteered to do things. They volunteered to do some of our program management. Like every time a scholarship information came in the mail, I just put it in the basket. And then once a week as a community service project, there was a service club that came in and logged all the information into a database from about that scholarship. So again, there's lots of ways to get folks to do parts of your program for you, either the program management part or the non-program part. So, and I mentioned our council became big advocates. So, okay, so let's look at the online system. I'm going to go ahead and get into that. So let me back out here. The first time, I'm going to go just log in from scratch. The first time you log in, you're going to go to www.asainstitute.org. So the same place where you got your username and password, except this time you're going to go /log, log. And when you do that, you'll you'll come up with a welcome page that talks about the purpose of the logs and the features of the log. Then there will be a copy of a video, may even be this webinar that we're recording right now, but there will be a copy of a video that's like this one right here in the intro video. And then this just gives you some features of the program, and then get started. So this needs to be set up one time in each school. So one person in your school will do the initial setup. So, and there's instructions down here for how to get set up, some tips. But what you'll do is you'll go to one of two places. If you are participating in RSC, you can go into the RSC Online System, and there's a step in our process page. Let me show you that real quickly. I think I can do that. So, yeah, let me just log in. So if you want to see our online system, for our total system, you could go to ASA Institute /RSC, where we went before. And then if you just want to look at it, log in as a school, use demo123 for your username and password. And that will bring you into a demo site. Or if you have your own username and password, just enter it in. You'll come to a page that looks like this. If I click on the process tab, this is where all of the process is for our process. And you'll notice here under collect data, this is where you conduct our student survey. So that needs assessment I was talking about, you could use this needs assessment. And this is where you'll start the log. So you can either click here to go to the log page, or you can go in this, when you went to /log, you can just click on log setup right here. And that will take you to the page that only has to be set up one time. So on this log setup page that only one person in your school will complete, we're setting some defaults. The counselors on their individual pages will be able to change these, but we just want to set up some defaults. So you're going to set up your log start and end time. Now, our recommendation is that you start this as early as you think that a counselor might possibly be in your school, maybe just, a couple times during the year, but once in a while they may show up at 4 a.m. So I would start it that early. And then the latest possible time that counselors might be delivering the program. So if counselors are there for a financial aid night or a parent program, and we talked this morning about making this later than 9 p.m. because I know lots of times that if you have a parent night, you might be there after 9. But just make that as broad as you need it to be. The only disadvantage of making it broad is that when your counselors get to the time use log page, there will be more rows. But the advantage of making it broad is that you're going to capture every hour that counselors are spending. Okay, and then you also have a choice of how often you want your counselors to log. Some schools have told us that they want to log every 5 minutes, and other schools have told us that they would like to do it less frequently, maybe every 30 minutes. For me, I always like to log every 20 minutes, so I would log 3 times for each hour. Then make sure you save that. And then the next thing we need to do is to set up each counselor's individual log page. So to do that, you're just going to add the counselor's name, John Smith. Oops, that's his first name, John Smith, and then the email address. And save. Okay, now as soon as I saved, that sent John an email with a link to his unique log page. So, and then you can see it also puts John's name on our list of counselors who are using this system. I can edit the counselor's email address if I typed it in wrong. I can resend the link if John can't find it, or I can delete John. So, okay. So, then let me show you what their link's going to look like. Amy, jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, if you're a counselor and you're the one who's setting up the logs, you will need to send yourself one of these links. So be sure to enter yourself here.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so now the email that they get is going to look like this. There, by the way, is the log address, asainstitute.org/log. Okay, and then their email will look like this. So the email is going to say, you're receiving this email because a member of your school's steering team for RSC, Redesigning School Counseling. So even though you may not have set up a steering team because you created a system, the system views you as a steering team of one. So somebody in your school has requested that you receive this personal place where you can do your time use log. So and then here's their personal link. Now come back. On their personal link, couple things about it. One is we made it very hard to remember, because that's kind of for confidentiality purposes, so that somebody else can't get another counselor's log and easily remember it and use it. And then we've made a note here to the counselor to not share this URL with anyone, because anybody with this URL would be able to edit that counselor's time use information. So we just want to make sure that the counselors are keeping this information private. The other thing is that if they were to leave this open on their screen, somebody could come in afterwards and mess around with their log. So we just recommend that they not share their login link, and that they close their screen when they're finished working on the log. Okay, so now let me go back. So okay, so that is how we set up the log. And then when the counselors log in, this is what they're going to see. So their email comes, they have their login link, and then this is what they'll see. So the first thing they have to do is to enter their weekly contract hours. So if that's 37.5 or 40 or whatever, they would log in their weekly contact hours. And if they're, instead of entering hours and minutes, we need to put that in as a decimal. So 36 hours, 20 minutes would end up being 36.33, 36 1/3. Then we also need them to tell us what their FTE is, if they're a full-time counselor, half-time, or whatever. So if I'm an elementary school counselor and I have 2 buildings and I'm doing this log for one of my schools, for that school I would say that maybe my full contract hours are 40, but for this school, I'm sorry, yeah, my full contracts are 40, but for this school, I'm not a full-time equivalency, I'm a half-time equivalency. So they're writing in their full contract hours, and then they're writing in what the FTE is in that building. So, okay, now the system, if they show 40 hours here, the system is only accurate if they go ahead and log 40 hours in terms of the system calculating the percentages. If they say, my contract is 40 hours a week, but they only log 20 hours, then the system doesn't know what they did in the other 20 hours. And so the system doesn't know how to calculate those percentages. So in order for the percentages to calculate properly, we have to make sure that every time block, at least 40 hours worth of time in the week gets logged. Okay, so then the individual counselor is asked to talk about their time use goals. So they're going to write in that, my goal is to spend 50% of my time on guidance, 30% on counseling, 10% on advocacy. We do not recommend or require any kind of time percent goals. We think that's really a local decision. I know that there are other organizations that recommend that counselors spend, 80% of their time doing guidance and counseling, or 40% of their time doing counseling. But we really think that's really individual. For example, if it's a rural school where students don't have any access to community mental health organizations nearby, in that school, the school counselor may spend a higher percentage of their time performing counseling services. If it is a very, very affluent school where the majority of the parents have been to college, there may be less need for guidance in that school because the parents are providing guidance. And in that school, there may be a higher percentage of time on counseling. So, and it may be too, and then the needs assessment, your assessment showed that your students don't have very many personal social issues. And in that case, there wouldn't be as much need to spend time on counseling. So, so yeah, so we think this is really individualized. And then here's where the counselor can adjust the time use log. They can say, we want to start our day at 4 in the morning, or we don't want to start the day at 4 in the morning, we want to start it at 5. And we're never going to be here till 9 o'clock, and we don't want those rows to appear, so stop the rows at 8. And then I want to use 15-minute blocks instead of 20. So, and then they hit the save button, and that saves all of that and opens up the first page of the log. I already made some entries on this page in our last webinar, so I'm going to go to next week and pretend that I'm logging ahead of time. Okay. So a couple things on this page. You just saw I can go to next week or previous week. I can also click on this calendar and pull up any week in the year. Here's instructions. And then if you want to print your week, you can do that. And that may, like when I worked ahead of time to set up my log, I would print out the next day, and then that would be kind of my schedule for what I was doing the next day, would be the printout version of my log. I also, as an advocacy piece, I gave a copy of my log each week at the end of the week to my principal. She didn't ask me for it, but I wanted her to understand, that I was busy and how I was spending my time. My hope was that if she understood I was busy, I would get fewer non-program activities. So because, and I had student names entered here, but because this was in-house sharing of this information, that was okay with FERPA. So we were good with that. Okay, so let's see how this log works. Let's say this day I came in at let's say 7 o'clock, and the first thing that I did is I created the scholarship form that I needed to do. And that's what I had planned to do in the first 30 minutes of my day. So I put the scholarship form in there. Now we have a kind of and then I'm going to code in what kind of activity it is. And if I move away from there and I don't code it, you can see you get a little reminder. Oops, you forgot to code this one. So I'm going to look at this. This is something behind the scenes that I'm doing to manage my program, so it's going to get an M. And then I plan to do that for a whole half hour. So on the next one, I'm just going to, and actually, let's say I'm going to do this just for an example for a whole hour. So what I would do is I can just put my cursor. Oops, I did it wrong, didn't I, Amy? I'm going to hit the shift button and then put my cursor in the last block and then click, and you can see it just copied everything, what I did and the type of activity it was. So I'm planning out all my days. Let's say that after that I'm going to see John Doe, and then it's, oops, I forgot to code. So it's going to be a guidance activity, and then Jane Smith, and that's another guidance. So I just keep, adding these in, and it's, it's really kind of simple guidance activity. Okay, there's two types of activities that we could code that I haven't talked about yet. One is a P that stands for paid time off. So let's say that this was a school holiday, and I might just say that this was, I don't know, maybe this was the beginning of the winter break.
Hey, Sue.
Yes.
I would recommend that you make your first one in your contract hours. So if your contract hours for a holiday for paid time off,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
and that way it
So,
doesn't overcount your paid time off hours.
okay. Oh, I see. Okay, so my contract starts at 7:30. So I'm doing winter holiday, and then that is going to be paid time off. And then I'd find the end of my contract hours, which would be, say, 3:30. I'm going to shift and then click, and it fills it all in throughout the day. Okay. And then the other kind, let's say that you're not filling out your things ahead of time, you're doing it after the fact. And now let's say it's Monday and it's the end of my school day, and I cannot remember what I did from 9:30 to 9:45. I didn't keep up. I got sidetracked, and I did so many things that day. I'm clueless. So what we need to do in that time period is to click F for forgot to log. That tells the computer what you were doing, that you were doing something in this time period, but we just don't remember what it is. We don't know what it is. So, okay. So those are the 4 types, or I guess 7 types of log codes that you could possibly put in. Okay, I'm going to take questions in just a minute, so type some in if you have them. Just want to show you the summary reports. So, and you can also, you can print these reports. So here's your annual summary. It shows you your time use goal for each type of activity. It shows you the raw data, how many hours you spent in that activity, and then how many hours total there were that you logged, and then how many were logged for this type of activity, and then it calculates up here your percentage. So yeah, so I think it's really interesting to compare. That your goal was to spend 50% of your time in guidance, you only spent 42%. Your goal was to spend 30% in counseling, you only spent 8%. So where did you spend your time? Oh, look at this management. My goal was 5%. I spent 38%. And so, then you're thinking, I mean, remember, these are good activities. They're managing your program, but you might be thinking about, how can I do this more efficiently? So, and then also we're giving you a week-to-week entry. The counselors that we've worked with, the types of activities that they do flow over the year. For example, in a high school, they do a lot of guidance in the beginning of the year when they're setting up helping students schedule courses and pick their courses. They'll do a lot of guidance the second semester when that's happening too. But in a lot of high schools, that's not happening in October or in December, or October, November. And you'll see the percentage of time spent in guidance decrease. So in my school, when we looked at the data, we thought, oh, we're not spending time on guidance there. Maybe we could be dropping in some of our counseling initiatives there. So we did a lot of group counseling in October, November. But the reason we picked those months is we saw how our guidance time was going down in those months. So yeah, that was interesting. And then here's tips, when to complete the log. We've talked about that. One other thing, final thing on category use. When you're selecting a category, it's often like you have to think about it. Exactly what am I doing in that time, and why am I doing it? If you did lunch duty, for example, and you just stood there for disciplinary purposes, that would definitely be a non-program activity. But if you're using, that time as walk-in guidance hours, then that's a guidance activity. So sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what is this activity. I'm meeting with parents. Is that a non-program, or is that an advocacy, or is that a counseling? So what we recommend is that you make that decision, but however you decide it, do that consistently. That if a parent meeting is advocacy, then you're always going to call it advocacy. Although I personally would call it counseling, but if you call it advocacy, that's fine, as long as you do that consistently. Then the other thing that's important is that every counselor in your building is doing the same thing. So in my school, when it got confusing to me, you know, is this non-program or is this guidance? What is this? During our counselor meetings, I would just toss this out and say, you know, how are you guys coding this? And if it became clear that we were doing different things, then we would come up with an agreement that we would all code it in this way. So as long as you're consistent over time and all the counselors are doing the same thing, you're in good shape. Okay, because then you'll be able to explain to others what that data means. Okay, so I think that's it. Thought of one thing. Oh, after the counselors have saved this counselor information page, every time they log in, it will go to the weekly log page. Okay. Amy, questions? Do you see questions that have come into the chat?
There are a couple of questions that I've answered privately, but
Okay.
I'll go ahead and share those. One counselor asked, is it possible to set the minute per time block at less than 5 minutes? And we have not made that happen. When we worked with counselors to ask, you know, what were the defaults, 5 minutes was the smallest time block anybody requested. And everybody thought that lady was crazy. So, but she really said she wanted to be accurate. So she wanted 5 minutes to be her time block. Everyone else fell into 10 to 20 minute blocks or half an hour. We had that half an hour was kind of an outlier too.
So, and we can also answer that by saying we can customize anything for you, but then we have to charge. So
Yeah.
if that's really, really important, call us and we can, you know, talk about doing that for you, but I can tell you it would be pricey. You know, I'm very fortunate to work with a board that is totally committed to school counseling, and it is agreed that we can provide free services for counselors, but when we start customizing, then we have extra expenses and we have to pass those on. So yeah, so okay, another question, Amy?
How is lunch treated?
So lunch, that's a good question. Lunch, so this is what we would discuss in a staff meeting. So I'm thinking through my head, it's not counseling, it's not guidance, it's not I'm not managing my program, it's not advocacy. I would probably count it as paid time off because I'm not with anybody, I'm being paid. I don't know, Amy, has that question come up before? How did you answer that?
Well, this is one I haven't answered yet, and I thought
Okay.
you would be the better person. I know that when people are on lunch duty officially, they put it in as non-program unless they are able to use that time, like your school was, where they started using that as almost walk-ins, or really just like walk-ins. But other schools where you just have your own time, I think they would have put that in as paid time off.
Yeah. So,
Like a break.
but again, the important thing is that whatever you decide, it's consistently done over time, that all the counselors are doing it the same way. So, but just, you know, my opinion is it doesn't really fit into any of those other 5 categories, so I would count it as paid time off.
We have another question that would probably lead to customization. Is there a way to include additional notes of sessions?
No, but I tell you what, you know, I have a wish list of things that we'd like to develop, and that's one of them, that you would click on a student's name and a, you know, text box would come up, and then you could make some notes about that session. The other thing that I would love to do down the road, and again, you know, because this is a free service, we can't do everything at once, but the other thing that I really want to do is to be able to click a button. So you'd pre-enter all of your meetings for the day, and then then you would just click a button and all the student passes would pop out. So, you know, I used to spend hours writing student passes. So those are features that in the future, you know, we'd love to add in, but right now, not available, unless, of course, as Amy said, you want us to customize and you're willing to pay for those services, then we can do it.
And
But
Here's another one of those questions. Does the log speak with student information systems to populate names? Also, can it speak with our SIS to show contacts with students?
Yeah, same thing. No for right now, but we have done other initiatives where we auto-populate student information from either, like in our whole school improvement initiative, we auto-populate student achievement data from the Department of Ed's website. We've auto-populated students' district's data before. So that's something that we could customize for you, but in the free version, no. And I feel like this is starting to sound like a commercial, and it's not. It's not our intent to do any customization. We're not trying to drum up business, but we're just letting you know that we have a wonderful programmer, and he always tells me that he can do anything if he just has time. Well, time for us, as a nonprofit means we have to, we have a bill to pay. So, so yes, we can do anything you want, but our hope is that we've designed this system in a way that is user-friendly for the majority of schools without any customization. But the other thing is that when you ask for those things, it kind of puts things on our to-do list too as features that we can build in later for free. So I appreciate you letting us know what you would like.
Yeah, or sometimes we find funders who, are interested in this, and we can get them to support that kind of work. It's great to have a wish list of the next steps to grow these things.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have another question. Is this being used in Ohio? And if so, do we have any idea on how many? And
we do have several schools that have accounts, RSC accounts in Ohio. We presented at the Evidence-Based School Counseling Conference when it was, I forget the city, but it was like just below Cincinnati in Kentucky, Henderson, I forget. But at any rate, there are a lot of Ohio counselors there, and I noticed that shortly after that conference, we had a lot of accounts opened up by Ohio counselors. So, we could, yeah, so that said, webinars are pretty easy for us to do. They're not real time intensive. If any of you wanted us to do a webinar, I mean, I'd want to do it for more than 2 people, but like if you wanted to offer through your counseling association to publicize a webinar where we would introduce this free service, or your state department wanted us to provide a webinar for specifically for the counselors in your state, we'd be happy to talk with you about doing that. And yeah, so, as long as it's not too time intensive, if we were to get 50 states to request that, there's only so much we can give away for free. But we just want this thing to be used. So I'm happy to do that. So if you're looking for other schools, the other thing is if you want, we're going to post this, this webinar. So the other thing you could do is bring together all the counselors in your district and just show this webinar. Or you could just create an account and walk people through. But so we literally are just launching this today. We've been using a paper version of this. And then in the past, counselors would count up their blocks and enter the number of blocks into our online system. So so we're building our users right now. So we'd love to have a lot from Ohio.
See, that reminds me, did we talk about how this will do an aggregate report for your school? So that
yeah, no, we haven't yet.
Okay.
So the other thing that this will do is, and this is really unique. I've not seen this anywhere before. Maybe I've just missed it, but I would be surprised. So the other thing that this system will do is it aggregates the data for all of your counselors into one report. And there's some situations where that might be very helpful. For example, in my school, we delegated different responsibilities, and one of our counselors was only responsible for responsive services or counseling. She did not have a part of the alphabet. She did not do any guidance, no career development, academic development. All she did was social personal counseling. So if someone were, like if our board were to look at her log, they would just get the impression that, all we did was social personal counseling. We did no career development, no academic development. So, so what we've done in this system is we aggregate all of the data into a department report. So you can see as a department, all of your counselors are providing the percentage of time that your counselors collectively are providing in these different areas. So that I think is going to be a really good thing. Another situation where that might be useful is occasionally schools will tell us that they have one counselor that really doesn't want to do any counseling or guidance, but they're very happy to do all the non-program tasks. So, to give an accurate picture of what's happening in your school, we want to capture all of those non-program tasks from that one counselor. So, that one counselor is going to have ends and everything. But then when we aggregate that data, it'll show your community, what you actually have. So the other thing, matter of fact, there's one other thing I want to talk about, Amy, that I forgot. Oh, I forgot to do this in the last webinar. This is really big. So you report, the counselor reports an FTE, but in reality, they may not be a full-time counselor. Let's say that they were spending 50% of their time on non-program tasks. In reality, that school does not have a full-time counselor. They have a half-time counselor and a half-time junior administrator or, administrative support or something else. So what the system will do is once we know what percentage of time the counselor is spending in non-program tasks, then the computer will adjust the FTE to show you in reality you've got a full-time equivalence. On paper you have a full-time equivalency, but in reality, because of all the non-program tasks, you have a half-time counselor or a 2/3 times counselor or 90% counselor or whatever. And that will also impact your counselor to student ratio, because your ratios right now, my guess, are based on what your full-time equivalency is on paper. You're one counselor to 300 students or 400 students. But in reality, you're not probably one counselor to 400 students. You're, a 0.75 counselor to 400 students, which when you do that math, that'll make your ratio bigger. It'll end up being 1 to 500 rather than 1 to 400 or something like that. So this adjusted FTE is really important for advocacy, and just to tell the picture like it is, that you don't have full-time counselors, you have part-time counselors because they're spending part of their time doing non-program activities. So, okay, other questions or other things, Amy, that we need to bring out?
Those are all the questions, and we do have a comment, though. Just wanted to say thank you for this great free service. I'm very eager to start using and making the rest of the counselors in our district aware of this. So,
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that reminds me. Yes, thank you very much. I love it when we are providing these services, when we get feedback that they're helpful. That's good. The other thing is we're on a big campaign right now to let folks know about our free services, and so there's 3 big things. One is our whole school counseling design process, so that would be RSC. The other is our college and career readiness survey, which you can do, with nothing else, just use that. And all of that data, that's really rich data. All that student needs data is disaggregated by different student groups. So you can figure out, that your boys have this need, but your girls don't, or your paid lunch kids have this, or your free and reduced lunch kids have this need, but your paid lunch kids don't. So when you're looking at where are your guidance gaps, or when you're looking at identifying students that maybe are left behind in guidance, the survey will really help you do that. And the survey also disaggregates data by report card grades. So we ask the students, tell us what kind of grades you usually get on your report card. That is my most favorite disaggregation, because it is so clear why kids who get D's and F's get D's and F's. The kinds of choices they make are nothing like the choices that students who get A's and B's get. And so you're able to, use that. And then you can also identify who the kids are who said that, say that maybe get D's and F's on the report card and don't know where to find extra help. And then you can ask the computer to give you the email addresses or for those kids. This is all FERPA compliant. We've been through this with our attorney. We can give you our attorney's statement. We've also been through it with the feds. So we have their consultation on this as well. So any rate, but that's a rich resource. And then the third resource is the log. So feel free to tell other counselors in your states about this. If there's something that we can do to help you spread the word, you know, we'd be happy to do that. And back to the RSC system, you know, you can use the tools in the RSC system without getting engaged in RSC in the whole process. So it's all free. So, okay, if there's nothing else, Amy, last call for questions.
Nope, that's it. Oh, let me double check. Oh, there are a few more. Sorry, they just came in. Can I search kids' names if needed to be able to count number of sessions with an individual? That would be another that we're gonna
put that on the to-do list. That's a great idea.
Yeah. We have another thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm envisioning this report, Amy, that where I pull up a student's name, all my contacts are there, but then I can also get a report that shows the notes from that meeting with that student. So
one of these days. Absolutely.
Put on this, and you know, I think that would be really cool. I mean, we'll look for a funder, and if you guys have a funder locally that would support that that programming, you know, we'd be happy to talk with you about that. But I really like that idea.
There's a question about the college and career readiness survey. Is it the one on the page with the setup? So if you'd want to go to RSC, we can show. And
let me show you that.
And asking also what the reports in the college and career readiness survey look like.
Okay. Let me show
We have another webinar dedicated just to the college and career readiness survey.
Okay, let's just show them where that is, and then we can show them where the webinar. When you say webinar, you mean video, right?
Yes, I'm sorry, a recorded webinar.
Okay, so to get to the survey, you would click on process, and then you're going to go down to the collect data, and you begin by setting up the survey, and there's instructions on how to do that. When you set up the survey, the computer is going to give you a code for each grade level, and when your students start the survey, they'll enter the code, and that tells our computer that it's your school and what grade they're in. And the survey is customized for each grade level, so we're not asking third graders about FAFSA. And then the other thing we want to make sure you realize is that this is actually two surveys. There is a survey that asks students about the choices that they're making connected with academic achievement, like do they do their homework, you know, that kind of stuff. And then that also has questions about their guidance knowledge, so about their mastery, their self-reported mastery of the guidance indicators. So career development, academic development, social personal. That's the first survey. The second survey, let me back up. On that first survey, we asked students for identifiable student information because one of the questions says, would you like more information from your counselor? And if so, then we need to tell the counselor who they are. But that question also says, if you say yes, we're going to release what you said on the survey to your school counselor so that, you know, they know how to help you. So so then the second survey is a survey that is in no way associated with student identifiable information. And that survey includes questions about students' social personal needs, and it also includes questions about what the kids think of their school counselors' personal attributes, like do they care about kids? Do they have high expectations of kids? That stuff. Their knowledge and their skills. So, so we don't want any identifiable information on that survey. But when students take that survey, the surveys are back to back, and it appears like one survey to the students. But I just wanted to explain that to you because sometimes people get freaked out and they think, oh, we've got all this student identifiable information with the social personal stuff. And I never wanted to put counselors in a situation where someone would have said, well, you should have been able to predict that this child was going to commit suicide or attempt suicide or run away from home or whatever because the answers on the social personal questions. So there's no way that anybody, including our staff, can identify a student on that second part. Okay, now that said, the survey report, I'm going to click on that. So here's all the different reports that you can get out. So I don't know, in demo school, we didn't give the survey last year. I don't know what year I'm going to have to go back to, but so I'm going to say I want a survey for all grades. And let's just, let's do a lunch program status drill down. And let's just ask, I'm just going to do the plans and choices questions. And it'll take a while because the computer's now pulling off a ton of data from our system as it generates the report. And usually it doesn't take this long. We might, there we go. So, you know, do you plan to go? Oh yeah, this survey wasn't given in 2007 in demo school. So, but you can see kind of how it works. Do you plan to go to college? This is answered by students in grade 10. Yes, and then we give you the raw data too. And then we break it down. This is all students, then we break it down to free and reduced and paid lunch. So when you set up the survey, let me see. So I'm just going to pause on this. You'll see that some of these icons for the different reports. So all these icons are different reports. So you can see that some of the icons are in yellow. That means that this is password protected and nobody can get these results unless they have the username and password. The plans and choices and guidance needs questions are available to the public because these are guidance issues. And in our work, we want community organizations to be addressing those guidance issues too, in addition to the school. And in one of our initiatives, we marry those two initiatives together, and it works really nicely. But at any rate, so that's what that is. And then here's the student list generator. So when I need a password to get into that, and notice that I can't get student names ever for student assistance and counselor perceptions. But when I go into that, then here are things that we have to ask for to be FERPA compliant. Just like if somebody were to go into your perm records and pull out paper records, they're supposed to, before they access student records, explain why they're accessing those records. And then this is, are you going to be using this to send an email to kids, to send a postal mail to kids, and or are you sending a postal mailing to parents? And then you hit next, and then on your next screen, if I didn't put, there you go. Yeah, it's telling me I have to have something in here. On the next screen, it's going to then let me narrow down the list. So I can tell the computer, I want, I want just free and reduced lunch students who get A's and B's on the report card. And then you further narrow it down. You can say who free and reduced, who have A's and B's in the report card, who are planning to go to a college or community college next year. And then when you get that list of emails, then you can shoot an email to those kids. The emails will all have commas between them or semicolons, depending on what you ask the system for. And then you can shoot an email to those kids and say, we're having a college night to learn about colleges and community colleges, and we really want to make sure that you're there. So if you're, if you're trying to reduce the guidance gap between your free and reduced lunch and your paid lunch kids, that would allow you to target those paid lunch kids who get good grades and are planning to go to college. So Yeah, and all the demographics are self-reports, and we hear from schools that on the younger kids, a lot of them don't know if they're free and reduced lunch, so you have to take that with a grain of salt, and if you think that's the case, then don't use this desegregation.
Sue, I want to mention too that we only ask for like email addresses and contact information for grades 8 and higher.
Yeah.
Anything below that, K through 7, we don't ask those questions.
Yeah, and that's because we think that below 8th, we want to make sure the kids understand what they're doing when they release information. So technically, by FERPA, they don't have to release the information since since this is being released for educational purposes, just like you don't have to get a kid's permission before you send a transcript to a college. But we don't want that to ever be an issue, so we only work with kids that want to work with us. So
we have another question about the survey, asking if students can identify their specific counselor for schools that have more than one. That is not.
No,
yeah.
No, we haven't done that. That's another interesting thing, though. So let me show the survey setup. So when you set up the survey, I love these questions. You're making me think.
Yeah.
On the survey setup, so conduct the student survey. I'm going to click on enter, and on the survey setup, we have a counselor questionnaire also. This questionnaire is about the opportunities that you provide for students, and it gives you a nice report. For example, kind of showing you a lot of stuff here, but these are opportunities that we think that students in a school with a sound school counseling program would be likely to have. So do students have an opportunity to take a learning styles assessment? And then you just write in the percentage of students, so it's a counselor self-report, you write in the percentage of students who have that opportunity, and then where they have the opportunity. And sometimes it's in the school, but sometimes you have a partner, and it's happening in the community. So, okay, so that's on the setup. And then the other place in the setup is you're asked, oh, this one's already set up, but you're asked.
You can still go to the step 2, and you'll be able to.
Okay, select question sets for the student survey. So I go here, and then this is, so by default, all students get the plans and choices questions. But then you can choose to ask about the mastery of the guidance indicators, which is the guidance needs. So that's knowledge based. Do kids have this knowledge? Or you can choose to put those questions on your survey or not. You can choose to add the counseling needs in the perceptions of the school counselors. So, and remember, the only people that are going to get the results are you, unless you want to share it with other people. On the perception of school counselors, I can tell you in the school counseling program, that is one of I think, the best in our state. They have an exceptional program. First time they gave this survey, the students all said that the counselors didn't care about them. And it just broke the counselors' hearts. I mean, they thought, how can that be? And the first thing those counselors did, to their credit, is they sat down, they said, okay, let's really think about it. Do we not care about kids? And they decided that, we care about kids. So they decided they had a perception issue. And the first year that they worked with us, all they did was work to change that perception, because they knew that if kids thought that the counselors didn't care about them, they wouldn't come in to see the counselor. So, and then they also did a lot of talking about why did the kids perceive that we didn't care about them. And they finally decided, and I personally think this is accurate, they said, we talk so much about how busy we are that people are afraid to talk to us because they don't want to add anything more to our plates. And I've also had that same discussion with funders. Funders have told me we don't want to give money to counselors for any kind of initiatives because they're already overworked. They don't have time to do anything. So I'm getting on my little soapbox here, but I personally think that we do ourselves a disservice when we talk publicly about how busy we are. And so what these counselors did in their school is they really went on a campaign that like when someone would ask for, can I see my counselor? The answer was always, well, certainly. Well, of course. Counselors never talked anymore about how busy they were, and they started to see that perception change over time. So that was really cool. So at any rate, so I just say that, so if you do get this survey and those kids say that you don't care about them, that isn't necessarily the case. It may just mean that there's that perception out there, and as a counselor, I mean, I don't want to change that. I'd want to know so I could change that perception. So okay, but what I'm thinking here, Amy, is we could add a question that says, would you like the data to be disaggregated by counselor? And then we'd have to ask the students their counselor name, but let's put that on our list of future things as well. I like that. Very cool.
And we have another question. Can we receive a certificate of completion for PD purposes? For professional.
What we give you, if you were to participate, I'm going to answer this two different ways. The first question, we provide a log of what we call professional growth points. It's basically 1 point for every hour that you work. In Indiana, they're called professional growth points, but that you could use that log to also show how many hours you've put into this. That's a paper log. But then we provide, at least for Indiana schools, we provide a certificate that shows that. I think that if you were working in RSC with us, we could come up with something for you that it would either fill out a form that you provide us with the hours that you give us that you've logged. So you would turn in the log, and then you would turn in a form that you would like us to fill out, or you could just ask us to create a generic statement that you spent so many hours doing this. So yes, we can make that work. And again, it just, if we get 500 requests to do that, there's no way we can do it. But if it's a few, absolutely. What I'd rather see is, I'd rather work, I mean, if we were to do this initiative statewide, then we can work with your state department, or we can create one thing that 60 schools are going to use. So it really, we like to work with volume of schools, because then it's more efficient for us, and it is why we can provide the services that for free. So, but yes, on a small scale we can do that.
Okay, that seems to be it for questions. They've been really good.
Absolutely, and I appreciate, we usually are very religious about closing our webinars at an hour, and almost all of you have been on for an hour and a half now. So, but I hope you like these resources, and again, we build these resources from input from counselors and telling us what they would like to have, and then we'll look for a funding source, or they look for a funding source. If we develop it for one school, then we're able to, to give it away to other schools. Yeah, so keep us informed on what you might need, and also if you use some of our tools, it would be wonderful just to get an email from you, so we know, what you like and what you don't like, and any kind of feedback like that you can give us would be great, and help us spread the word. I think we're going to start doing some exhibits at the ASCA conference. So far, we're in 41 states through word of mouth. But yeah, help us spread the word. So, okay, thanks everybody. Thank you, Amy. And we'll catch y'all later. Thanks, everyone.